So you're observant. Welcome to the Health and Wellbeing Scrutiny Committee being held on the 20th of March 2025. Just to remind members that this meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded to YouTube. The first item on the agenda is apologies for absence. I have had apologies from Councillor Pallett, Councillor Marie Bayliss, Councillor Claymore and Councillor Helen Hadley for late arrival. Are there any other apologies? There being no further apologies, I will move on to the minutes of the previous meeting. Those have been circulated. Are they a true and accurate record of those proceedings? Is anybody prepared to move? Thank you, Councillor Wells. Second. Thank you, Councillor Doyle. All those in favour? Thank you very much. Moving on, update from Chair. I have no updates today. Declarations of interest, which I left out. Are there any declarations of interest for this committee? There being no declarations of interest and having already dealt with update from the Chair, I will move on to item 5, which is responses to reports of the Health and Wellbeing Scrutiny Committee. I don't think we have any, do we?
No, you're going to Cabinet next week.
I'm going to Cabinet on the 27th to take a previous recommendation about
Damp and mould and
yes, damp and mould and paperwork being accessible to people with impaired vision. So that's what I'm taking to Cabinet. Consideration of matters referred to the Health and Wellbeing Scrutiny Committee from Cabinet or Council, and I'm not aware of any. If we get through the entire agenda like this, I'm sure we'll all be happy. Update on health-related matters considered by Staffordshire County Council. We have not, as far as I know, received a digest from the County Council. No, nor is Councillor Jones attending here today, so we're not able to get a report there. There was a meeting of the Health and Wellbeing Scrutiny Committee on the 3rd of March at Staffordshire County Council, but because I was indisposed due to a minor accident I had a few weeks ago, I wasn't able to get there. As soon as we have a report from that meeting, we will circulate. And it is a significant one because I think dentistry was dealt with at that meeting. Moving on then to, if there are no questions on any of that. Moving on then to item 8, safeguarding children and adults at risk of abuse reports, Health and Wellbeing Scrutiny Committee today. Jackie, I believe it's you leading on this.
It is, thank you. So last report that we did was back in October 2024 and as you can see we've moved on quite significantly with our figures for the quarters over that period. Since obviously doing the report, the figures have changed slightly. We've now got 13 adult safeguarding referrals rather than 11, so that's an increase in referrals for all the quarters at present. Obviously we've got till the end of March for more figures to come in, resulting in that. All referrals that do come in are dealt with accordingly and kept on the system to make sure that any actions that need following up by staff members are done appropriately when we do so. As previously, when we talk about miscellaneous referrals are referrals where we don't have a lot of information. It may be information that's come via email or through customer services or a telephone contact, but we do act upon them, and obviously we try to gather as much information as we possibly can, and we also make sure that there is some form of outcome as a result of those miscellaneous that do come in for the person that may be at risk, and obviously we report that and record that as part of our figures as well. Staff, as you can see, have all had up-to-date safeguarding training, and the safeguarding policy version 20 is now live on the staff intranet. All the training has now gone out for the updates through Astute for staff members to be aware of the updates within the new safeguarding training that we have available to staff and to members as well. There's some information there. It was asked previously at the last scrutiny around the Safeguarding Children's Board, which is now known as Staffordshire Safeguarding Children's Partnership. Whether it's a board or a partnership, it does exactly the same. It's just the mechanisms that they wish to be known as a result of the processes that are in place. And it's made up by the three safeguarding partners, which are the Chief Exec of Staffordshire County Council, Chief Constable of Staffordshire Police, and the Chief Executive of Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent Integrated Care Board, which is basically health services because it cuts across all the streams within Staffordshire when it comes to health as well. So they are the three main partners. However, that's not to say that district and borough councils are not represented, because we do have subgroups and task groups that do feed along streams and partnership working in regards to anything that comes about that is a concern or a worry. Hence the Staffordshire Safeguarding Children's Partnership Learning and Practice Forum that myself does attend. So the Learning and Practice Forum is basically what's come about as a result of case reviews that have happened locally within Staffordshire, and it's about the learning established from those case reviews to see if there's anything that we need to do locally, but also are there going to be changes that reflect the work of the partnership and the actual mechanisms that pull the partnership together. So it's a great way to collaborate, look at learning, share best practice, obviously talk about things that concern and worry us and bring us forward, and it also gives us a voice if we feel that something's not working well in safeguarding, so it gives us that mechanism to report back up to the partnership and to those partners as well. Adult Safeguarding Board, we don't really have a lot to do in the fact of being an active member as such. That's not to say that we don't represent the work that we do with adult safeguarding, because we do have a representative within Staffordshire Borough Council. So if we feel something's not working well with adult safeguarding, then obviously we do have that representative. However, all I can speak is highly of adult safeguarding, because I've never had any issues when I've made any referrals. They've been really fantastic. They come back to us, they signpost where needs be, and we've got a very strong representation of adult safeguarding partners, especially in line with our vulnerability partnership meetings as well. Domestic abuse, stalking and harassment. So information around domestic abuse is obviously very current, and it is one of our major themes within our community safety priorities. So towards the end of last year, New Era kindly offered us some free training sessions for all our staff around understanding what domestic abuse is. They talked about the processes for making referrals into services, how the services work and support victims and perpetrators of domestic abuse, and the whole process around the risk assessments. And it was a great opportunity for staff to ask questions and access further training in particular areas, especially around stalking and harassment. And that was open to anybody within the council that could access that. There are courses that run throughout the year, and again, they are free. So it's a great opportunity for anybody that wants any awareness around domestic abuse to take this opportunity up while that training is available to them. Moving on, contextual safeguarding, which refers to the MACE, which is the Multi-Agency Child Exploitation Panel. So the MACE panel is still very current. The majority of children that seem to come across MACE are usually between the ages of 16 and 17 that we're predominantly dealing with at this moment in time. Lots of obviously concerns around risk-taking behaviours with a lot of young people, so lots of work is being done. We did have our ASB practitioner who would work with groups of children identified to be in activity around antisocial behaviour and potential exploitation. This will now be picked up by the youth offending team from April to work with those individuals that we deem that could be at risk of significant harm as a result of exploitation happening to them as well. And a lot of that information may also feed into our antisocial behaviour coordination group. So the obviously the list of the remit of the group is within the report, and also it talks later on in the report about how we pull the antisocial behaviour coordination group together. TVP, known as Tamworth Vulnerability Partnership Meeting, we've seen an increase in cases into TVP, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's positive the fact that we've got a lot more agencies coming forward in regards to sharing information about concerns and worries. And as you can see, there's a bit of a breakdown in the cases that have come forward. So since our last discussion, we've had an increase of 13 cases to this time last year in regards to concerns around vulnerability. And it can be any aspects of vulnerability that an adult or a family member or a young person may be going through. But it gives professionals the chance to speak with other professionals, link in and look at support that is available to that child, that family or that adult, you know, if they're just struggling or they don't know about services. So again, it's a great networking opportunity, as well as about finding out what services are available to our vulnerable people. There has been a case study that I've attached just to give you a bit of a flavour of just some of the cases that we deal with and to get an understanding of how the Vulnerability Partnership meeting works. And that was a great outcome for that case, because there were a lot of agencies involved that were very concerned about Mr. X. And as a result of the meetings that we had, we managed to put a plan of action and support in place and work directly with the individual and also offer support through wider community intervention as well. And everything else that's been attached to the report this time, we've also put in the equalities information in regards on the assessments around the report, and we work along with guidance with the Children Act and also the Care Act statutory guidance when it comes to adults and young people as well. And that's it.
Thank you, Jackie. I should have said at the beginning that Councillor Lewis Smith, who is the portfolio holder, had to give his apologies. He is a teacher and it is parents' evening this evening and he is obliged to be there. So, Jackie, thank you for that. Very comprehensive, really important area of work, probably the most important that this committee deals with. So thank you for bringing that to us. Are there any questions for Jackie? Councillor?
Just first off, excellent report as usual. In terms of the TVP, where you've listed some of the issues that you've had, you list 8 around housing. Are you able to give any examples?
So housing is basically the area that the referrals come from. So it could be around rent arrears, it could be around concerns around the property where they need support around the property. So it could be due to hoarding behaviours that they might have, or it could be due to a messy garden that's happened, or it could be a neighbourhood complaint due to antisocial behaviour that's come in. So when it says housing, it's literally the person who's brought the information and the concerns are to do with the housing.
Okay, thank you for that. In terms of the antisocial behaviour issues, 2 seems pretty low, to be honest, considering the population levels, which is good news. But thank you very much.
Because that's picked up probably through the ASB coordination group meetings. So a lot of the stuff that will come to the ASB coordination group will automatically already be triggered to be working with either by the police, environmental health or another agency will come along. So we try not to duplicate or have too much crossover.
Okay, thank you very much.
So just to clarify then, Jackie, it's where antisocial behaviours specifically targets safeguarding that it becomes your concern. The rest of antisocial behaviour is not.
Yes, if it has a detrimental effect on the adult or the child, then yes, it will come through to TVP.
Councillor Doyle.
I've got another one. It doesn't actually seem to be mentioned in this report, but I'm conscious of growing up with my brother and that, and has there been any indications of use being used for drug trafficking?
That will come under the MACE. So it will come under MACE information and then MACE intelligence, which is held by Staffordshire County Council in regards to that. So when we talk about exploitation, we cover all aspects of exploitation, whether it's sexual exploitation, whether it's county lines, which is the drug trafficking side of it. So we know a lot of young people do use recreational drugs, such as cannabis, for examples. But when it comes to actually transporting and transferring the drugs, it's not been a huge issue that I've seen or come across in regards to what's been discussed. It's more that young people are using the drugs for their own personal use, and it may be due to peer pressure as a result of that, or the fact that they may be influenced by their siblings or their peer groups.
So we're seeing increased drug use amongst the younger population.
Not an increase. I think we've always had drug use with young people. I don't think it's something that's always been there. I think it's the fact that with anything you highlight it more because you're discussing it more in regards to it. So there's probably a lot of young people that are using cannabis, etc., but we don't always know about it because they're not discussed at a panel as such, because the risks haven't been highlighted potentially, because they're not being involved in risk-taking behaviour, so to speak, or they've not been flagged up by a professional, or a parent hasn't shown any actual concerns for that young person potentially.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Doyle. Any other questions for Jackie? Councillor Wells.
Thanks, Jackie. It's a challenging report for me anyway. Again, some of these maybe just comments really to, again, reveal my complete ignorance on the thing. I read this and I really struggled to work out how all these various groups work together. If I take you through where I got through on this report, I just wonder if you'd help me with some of this, because you talked about, at the start of the thing, you talked about the Staffordshire Safeguarding Children Partnership, which you made a distinguishment, sorry, I can't even speak, which you said was basically the same as the board that was in there previously. So I'm getting the scope of their work is to do with children as it's in the title. Then further down, they've obviously got the Learning in Practice Forum, which is, as you said, there is a delegated responsibility from the above group. So that's sort of children in my mind. Then we move on to the Staffordshire, interestingly, and Stoke. We now include Stoke in the next one. Adult Safeguarding Partnership. Well, we've gone back to a board on there, but so that seems to deal with adults. And then we've got separate for domestic abuse, which is in the Community Safety Partnership. I just wondered if you could comment whether you think that's a good way of dealing with things, or whether
Staffordshire made the decision, and unbeknownst to me why that decision was ever made, but Stoke-on-Trent have their own Stoke-on-Trent Safeguarding Children's Partnership, and Staffordshire have Staffordshire Safeguarding Children's Partnership. Both do exactly the same, but it's just the districts that they obviously cover within Stoke, and I don't know the logistics why Stoke was never part of Staffordshire when it came to children's services. I can't answer that. But adults has always been Staffordshire and Stoke. And again, the reason for that I don't know. It was commissioners whoever made that decision in regards to that. So I can't answer those questions why that decision was ever made in regards to why they're separate. In regards to what I talked about earlier on, the Learning in Partnership Forum is a subgroup that feeds into the partnership. So we will be asked as districts and boroughs to represent certain strings that feed into that partnership. And for us, obviously, the case reviews is really important because we need to know the learning established from the case reviews, if a child has died or if a child has been seriously injured, to see if we can look at that learning to reflect any of our practices, things that we might need to do different within our districts and boroughs as a result of it. So it makes sense for us to attend those meetings, to be part of that. And then there may be task and finish groups that they feel, this is of relevance to districts and boroughs to represent. So it wouldn't necessarily be that Tamworth would go to all of those. It may be that we say, Stafford will take that lead, Lichfield will take that lead, we'll take a lead, and then we all come back and feedback in regards to the learning and the processes around that. The domestic abuse is completely different. So domestic abuse is commissioned through the Police and Crime Commissioner's Office, which is New Era, which is the commission service. So domestic abuse fits across the whole of the county. However, again, it is slightly different with Stoke because Stoke Commissioner's Service called GLOW. So New Era will work in partnership with GLOW, but they have to be very careful about, obviously, the remits of where they go up to, because, again, it's all around commissioning and who's commissioned to do what within certain areas. So we have to be careful about what we refer and what we reference into in regards to that. So that cuts across all the streams, and it does fit into safeguarding, but New Era is a commissioned service that will work with all victims of domestic abuse, and they work with children as young as 5.
Very much. Now you've explained it in those terms, it sort of makes sense now, but it just seemed to me when I was reading through it, there seemed to be lots of stuff going on, and you think, well, it'd be nice to have it all. But anyway, that makes sense. Thank you very much for that. The other observation really was when I looked at the figures, you've got the, we all like figures, don't we? When you go to that safeguarding statistics figure. So those are referrals, those are I'm just asking, those are concerns that have been raised by people. But they don't necessarily, so I'm guessing that once somebody's raised something and it is then investigated, it may actually be decided it's nothing or something. I'm guessing there's some sort of, you see where I'm coming from, there's some sort of figure that comes out the back of that, I guess.
So the figures that are on the table here are figures that have come from staff.
Right.
So these are figures that come directly through. We have a system that you should all be well aware of anyway. So on the intranet, we have forms that we ask staff and counsellors to complete if they've got a safeguarding. So they're the figures that come from those forms, what staff have actually completed in regards to that. And obviously on the form, it has to have an outcome. Yeah. So I need to know, okay, you've got a concern or worry about that adult or that child. What was the outcome? Because if there's no outcome, then we've not achieved anything. So I will go back to that staff member or that counsellor or whoever's made that referral and say, what was discussed, what was the outcome, what are they going to do, and what should happen. Every time you make a referral, whether it's a child or an adult, you will get a response. And what started to happen now, what staff members start to do, once they get that response, they feed it back, so it goes on the file. So we've got the evidence then from adult safeguarding or from children's to say, yes, it's hit the threshold, this is what we're going to do, or we've been out and done a visit. There's no further action for safeguarding, but that's not to say it's not going to be referred to another service, and that could be early help, it could be mental health support, it could be social care, or it could be something within the community that they feel is more relevant for them, and then we'll attach that to the file as so we know what the outcome was.
Can I just follow up? I mean, it rings a bell with me. I did follow in because one of my residents, I did have concerns. In fact, it looked very much like Mr. X that you had down there. And I didn't actually receive any feedback on that. Should I have done?
Yes, it's unfortunately, it's something that's only just happened realistically in the last 6 months or so. And it's something that we've been chasing up with our colleagues to say that we need an outcome. So if you're not getting a response, then ideally you should be getting an email to say what the outcome was. The only time you possibly won't be getting a response from your email is because you're actually going forward in the next steps. So, for instance, people in education won't necessarily always get a response because they will be going to conference or professionals meeting or core group or strategy discussion. So because they're actively involved, they won't get that response because they're already part of that process and leading that process to a finish for their own case files.
Brilliant, thank you very much for that. So it just shows the importance of the eyes and ears that we have on the ground and our contact with the public to make best use of that. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wells, and welcome, Councillor Hadley. Nice to see you. Are there any other questions for Jackie? I mean, I have one. It's not for answering today, but a lot of the arrangements that are currently in place, and I've already emphasised the importance of this report, are based on the current structure of local government. And as we know, that will be changing. And at some point, I think this committee or somebody will need assurance on how secure the arrangements will be post-reorganisation. So that's for a future meeting. If we could, I assume those discussions are happening now.
That's way above my head, unfortunately. I don't have any control over that. We'll see what happens when all the consultations and the restructures come out in the future. But safeguarding is obviously a massive priority, and it's not going to be brushed under the carpet. So there will be provisions that we put in place around safeguarding, but I can't say how that's going to look until we know what the end result's going to be and what the final
we don't know what
plan is.
the reorganisation will look like yet. So,
No.
yeah, but I'm assured that is being dealt with at the moment. Councillor Wells.
Just pick up on your point, because I think you're raising a really, really good point. It did sort of cross my mind when you were talking about the various structures, etc. But I think the people we're dealing with here are obviously very vulnerable, and I'm sort of just thinking about it. It's just a gut reaction at this point in time. Is that this change that we're all looking at? For the thing. This really can't afford to be tucked away as an afterthought. It's a sort of when we plan a change. What's in my head is if we're going to have to plan a change from where we are now to where we're going, we have to set some objectives as to what that change looks like. And I'd like, if it's possible, to raise up, and a prime objective has got to be that safeguarding is in place before any movement goes. I'd raise that really quite strongly with you, Chair, if that was possible to impress into any change plan that goes forward.
Yeah, you can safely rest assured that the security of future safeguarding arrangements will be one of the key considerations as we go forward. We are being asked as a committee, it is being recommended that the committee endorse the report. Can I have somebody who's prepared to move that, please? Thank you, Councillor Turner, and second, Councillor Doyle. All those in favour? Thank you very much. Moving on then, and thank you, Jackie. If you want to stay, you're more than welcome.
Thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much. Moving on, I don't know why I keep losing my agenda. Honest Conversations Community Cohesion Report. Now, again, the portfolio holder was Councillor Sarah Daniels, but she is also a teacher and involved in parents' evenings this evening, and so she has given her apologies and is not able to be here. So I believe, Gabriel, that I'm just about to hand over to you on this one. Is that right?
Thank you very much. Yes. Hello again to those of you that I've seen, and hi to those that I haven't met yet. My name's Gabriel Nookier. I'm an associate at Belong, and as you may or may not be aware, Belong was commissioned to deliver the Honest Conversations project. And I'm pleased to give you an opportunity to hear a presentation from me, and you can ask any questions you may have. I gather I may have 10 or so minutes?
Yeah, I think so. We're not doing badly in terms
Okay.
of time.
Yeah, good. Good, okay, and we have a presentation that I'll invite you to look at, and one thing that I'll now note in light of the announcement that it's on social media, I won't be mentioning some of the names of the organisations or individuals that are mentioned in the presentation, simply because it's important to recognise the fact we didn't obtain their consent to broadcast their participation in this. So you'll be able to see some specifics about who was engaged in this project that I won't mention verbally here. Great. So next slide, please. Thank you. Yeah, the Honest Conversations project involved these four major kind of first steps, and it's really been around engaging communities in honest conversations about community relations and how they've been before the riots, during the riots, after the riots, and the disorder that happened in summer last year. It's been about engaging with communities that aren't often part of conversations and official consultation processes. And this has flowed into a really rich vein of kind of information gathering about the state of community relations around the town and the areas surrounding it. A critical part of this has been the delivery of a number of workshops and structured discussions that have accompanied a range of much more informal conversations that have happened around bus stops and pubs and cafes. So we've tried to have pair this kind of formal, deep conversations with the reality that most people don't exist within formalised community structures that easily are invited to events like that. And throughout, there's been regular liaison with council officers, and that collaboration has been appreciated. Next slide, please. So the key aims of this have been really about developing a shared understanding through reflecting on the findings that have been emerging, and I would say have been accelerating over the last couple of months. Identifying some really key issues that the local authority will be keen to address in order to strengthen community relations, strengthen connections between diverse communities, and and really critically, which hasn't been a problem here in Tamworth, is highlighting positives to build on. And I suppose behind all this lies a contextualising that we're able to bring to this work, thankfully, which is the fact that Belong's involved in a number of support projects around the country at the moment, in relation to kind of response to the disorder that we saw last summer. And so part of that is contextualising what are the unique strengths and capacities that Tamworth has that can be leveraged to bring that community cohesion forward. Next slide, please. So the next few slides are the ones that I'll skirt over a bit more quickly without going into the detail, but it gives you an impression of the breadth of engagement that we've been conducting here. So there's been kind of a really strong focus on that cultivation of relationships, and I think what we're seeing now is that the readiness for people to engage in challenging conversations and critically engage in conversations that might be more formalised around a strategy development process, for example. There's a readiness to engage and there's a trust that's been established that I think wasn't there. So that's been really positive to see. We've got a number of dialogue sessions still planned, and what we're really focusing on at the moment is thinking about how that then transitions into the latter 2 points there, which is workshop and reflection sessions to share what we've been finding, in addition to the formal reports that we'll be submitting to Cabinet, and thinking about that skills sharing as an opportunity to bring different people together across Tamworth. So we'll go into that in a bit more detail, but skills sharing is an opportunity to, do what it says on the tin, but also to bring people together that may have had relationships previously, but they've become disconnected. People that never had relationships, and that can be between the council, but also between kind of key members of different organisations and community groups that we're seeing doing excellent work across Tamworth. So it's got that dual purpose of bringing people together and building skills as well. Next slide, please. So April, so looking a bit forward now, what we're planning on doing to really round off this honest conversations phase is to, the underlying purpose is to establish the groundwork for the next phase of work, which is that formalised strategy process. So it's about analysing the data alongside, analysing existing data alongside sort of community engagement, reflecting back findings, and identifying those next steps, linking up with the strengths identified from the listening phase, and then sharing good practice and some of the details of what we'd recommend focusing on around sort of tension monitoring, relationship mapping, and community sentiment analysis. Next slide, please. So I'll whiz through the next 5 slides quite quickly, but you can look at them and see just the names of all the organisations that we have engaged. So there's been strategic partnership meetings, there's been meetings with community organisations and institutions, there's been discussions with community group members. On the next slide, you'll see that we've been out in more informal places, meeting people, gauging their perspectives. We've been in colleges, and we've been in spaces where the VCS sector is well represented. And then, I think I'll just sort of skip over. You're getting an impression for the wide range of actors that we've spoken to. And the next slide, please. So, exactly. So, that slide gives you the metrics and the outputs for what's been achieved over this time. But I think more importantly, the next slide, please. Some of the issues that have been coming up that are helpful in kind of building an understanding of what the next phase should focus on is that there's really mixed ideas about whether or not people saw what happened coming. Some people within some of the communities that may have shared some more sentiments for understood why people would have mobilised around the disorder were saying that this it was quite predictable, but no one was listening, and those that perhaps were more surprised by the riots happening, obviously, they weren't hearing that in the community. That was a sentiment of resentment that was going to lead to that. So there's a real diversity of perspectives, but and a real diversity of perspectives around whether or not it was likely to happen again. Mixed views on that. There were quite mixed views on whether the riots were seen as racially motivated or motivated by the underlying economic factors that left people feeling desperate and needing some way to express their views. And some quite strong views that they were racially motivated and calls to do more to facilitate sort of inter-community relations or cultural exchange and education around those issues in Tamworth. Next slide. Yeah, thank you. What was clear, so there's anecdotes behind these, so I'm trying to think of how to present them without violating the anonymity of the individuals involved. But I think that what's really clear is that a high number of people are personally involved, personally implicated in terms of their relations, having participated in the disorder. And so actually there's a very wide network of people that have been personally affected by the subsequent convictions and prosecution. And so within an incredibly wide network of people, there's an incredibly live set of emotions whereby even if support for the actions are not there, they might disagree with some of the footage of what was actually happening there, but the sentiment about why people were participating in those kind of events and some of the narratives about why people were participating can also engender quite a strong sense of pride as well within a surprisingly wide network of people as well. One thing that was apparent in Tamworth, as is apparent in the work that we're doing around the country, is that there's very high levels of misinformation being voiced. And what's the real challenge around that is that, again, as is common around the country, there's very low levels of trust in official sort of mouthpieces. So local authority, government is not always seen as a legitimate myth-busting option. So there's a need to really focus on who is seen as legitimate voices and how to reach out beyond the usual communication channels in order to talk to people about what are issues of their concern and challenge any misinformation that might be driving people's views and behaviours. Next slide, please. I think perhaps there's no real need to dwell too much on this. This will be part of your bread and butter sort of day-to-day work as councillors and your engagement with communities. But the social change and the degradation of high-quality jobs, consistent work, reliable contracts is a major factor driving people's perception of insecurity. Housing is a real challenge for people and cost of living, and that's people were keen to emphasise that's something that they think is underlying the challenges and the tensions around community relations here as well. Next slide, please. Again, I'll be quick to try and allow plenty of time for Q&A, and that's the purpose of this session. So what was also clear was that it was common that a sense of blame was looking for an outlet, and whether or not we would sit here and agree that the reasons that people were blaming, for example, the council mostly, were legitimate because they fell within their mandate. Whether we'd agree with that or not, people had those grievances and issues around the use of hotels was a major point of contestation levelled at the council, whether or not the council has any sort of decision-making capacity around that at all or not. And I think this just underlines the importance of demonstrating the role of meeting community needs and having really effective comms around that to try and sort of slowly build up the level of trust required to then move on to any future myth-busting type initiative that might be required. But at the moment, it's about demonstrating proof of concept in a way. Next slide, please. Our overall assessment, though, in Tamworth, and this is not a given at all, is that there's a real sense of belonging here by the vast majority and a sense of pride about the town. And what struck me, and particularly my colleague Chrissy, who's done a huge amount of the community engagement, is the rich human resource that you've got here in this town. And I cannot understate how that's not a given in a lot of the places that we're doing this work around the country. And so that's a real finding that's coming out of that, is that you've got a real cultural richness and cultural capital that can be built on here in Tamworth for the next phase of the work. So casting our attention forwards, there's two really main logical next steps that we would see. Oh, yes, thank you very much. Yeah. And that's twofold. The first is to develop a strategic approach to cohesion, and that obviously involves kind of ambition setting, strategic objectives to fit that, and then some really clear projects and initiatives that are powered by local organisations to deliver that. That's a really key need, as we see it. And then running alongside that, but staggered slightly behind, some formal training and accredited courses develop organisational capacity within the local authority, but also within that really rich VCS sector that we think we've seen here in Tamworth. Next slide, please. And perhaps I won't go too much into these, but they're really unpacking those two strands that we're talking about being key priorities going forward. So the strategy development process, which could run from April to September, is really about making full use of the connections, that willingness and that readiness to engage in a process that has emerged and that won't last indefinitely. So making full use of that and connecting people with each other around Tamworth that aren't currently connected, connecting organisations in Tamworth that aren't currently connected with a local authority to them. And secondly, a comprehensive review of strategies and plans within the local authority, ensuring that what is developed is aligned with that. And really finally, that key point of co-producing a strategy and a framework built on focus groups and design labs, workshops and consultation that guides work going forward. Next slide, please. And as I said, running alongside that is that skills development within the town and within the council. As I said, it was running sort of parallel but staggered a little bit behind, and this gives a flavour of some of the kind of topics that we would recommend are beneficial for facilitating that. So that's facilitating increased conflict awareness, having difficult conversations around instigating effective tension monitoring systems within the town, and considering what are effective approaches for countering misinformation in light of the reality around that kind of gaps in mistrust and who are the actual audiences of local authority comms pieces. Yeah, thank you very much. So that's that. Next slide, please. Good, great. So I hope that was not too fast to whiz through, but I'd be pleased to open up any questions that you have.
Thank you, Gabriel. Any questions or comments for Gabriel? This is going as a report to Cabinet on the 17th of April.
Correct.
So this is our chance to have an input into what goes to Cabinet on the 17th of April. Castle Wells.
Thanks, Gabriel. I think it's massively encouraging that we're doing this work, and I think, as Chair has pointed out, we must capitalise on it, and we must make sure, I've said before, that this never happens again. Better than that, I think we should move forward as a group of people. I've got a couple of comments, because I've given this some further thought, that you've talked to various groups, and I can see that there's a big list, and do you know what, it actually prompted in me that, do I know people there? Should I know people there? So that's a really good kick up the, forgive me what I said there, backside, I suppose, is okay on YouTube. But more importantly, I think in any next phases, those are, I see those as islands of people. We need to bring those people together. And I would also say that we need to bring together in a physical way. I think that possibly one of the greatest factors behind the sad episode has been the echo chamber of social media. And I think that when people get together physically and meet each other and talk to one another, those echoes are not allowed to sort of generate themselves. So I would say that this council has a responsibility, if anything, at this point in time, to look at opportunities for bringing those groups together. If they were able to sponsor, and I use that word sponsor in its loosest possible sense, opportunities for different groups to come together. I can think of some really simple things at the moment. On your website at the moment, you talk about through sport. You know, five-a-side football tournaments between various religious groups would be an interesting move, to say the least, but possibly a very productive move. The other thing I would just put as part of that that next phase is you touched on the phrase myth busting. I think in my experience it doesn't work. I think during the height of this, there's been a lot of efforts to try and show the truth. And I think if somebody is emotionally wrapped up in something, they're just not going to accept it. This is why I think this is a people thing. This is a relationship thing. And I think it's about building those physical relationships with people so that they have that emotive investment, and we can you know, as it says, integrate together as a cohesive community. I think that's what's been missing. But those are just my initial thoughts on the matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, we would hugely agree with the need to kind of identify concrete ways of bringing people together from the various groups that we've already tapped into. And there's a number of ways that we're thinking about doing that. 3, in regards to kind of the formal processes themselves. So, of course, what's been happening as part of this honest conversations phase, we've been mapping groups, but the final part of it is that we're wanting to do these skills sharing sessions that we're talking about, and it's got that dual purpose that I was talking about at the start. The first being sharing the skills, but the second being bringing those people from different islands together in the skills development sessions. And we've already been giving quite careful thought to how that happens, because, you know, given the diversity of perspectives on some quite core elements of community relations that there are in Tamworth, those have to be managed quite carefully. But we're already thinking about, for this last phase of the honest conversations, as we do that skills development, who would be great to have with who in there, whose views are just almost diametrically opposed, but do we sense that there might be openness to actually engaging in a sense of good, honest conversation? And you know, we're giving considerations to how groups like that might be more about the facilitation of positive interactions rather than the content of a skills development, in which case we might have some sessions whereby certain sessions would be judged as less gaps to bridge, but more focused on really core delivering some skills around kind of conflict management or tension monitoring, for example. So we're thinking about that quite carefully in that. In the strategy development phase, it should definitely be co-development point, whereby the first phase of this honest conversations work, we think has provided a really positive basis and a readiness to participate in that co-development process. So that's something that we feel it remains to be seen, but we think that's there. And finally, there's that within the proposed next steps around the strategy. There's the second element of training, formalised accredited training, and we would hope that would work with council officers as well as councillors and members of the communities as well, that we think would benefit from being brought together. So we're thinking about that a lot, and I agree with that emphasis you placed. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Tarr.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, it was good Monday's session. I enjoyed, the play acting that we did. This is, a good start. One of the things that I'm concerned with is if the trust that they believe the council or the authority isn't doing a good job, setting up something that's organised, run and managed by the council, is it going to take ownership? Are they going to like it, love it and accept it? That's my concern, that we can talk and do a lot of talking to people. If they don't trust the person that's asking the question, how do we get honest feedback? And therefore that will, if you can't get the honest feedback, how can you make honest plans going forward? Secondly, there's a couple of things that, I've listened to the meetings that you've had. Do you think there's a trigger point obvious that was, okay, we can talk about the hotel and what happened that night, but looking forward, do you think there's anything else that we should be considering or concerned about? Thank you.
Thank you. That second question in particular is a good one. So I'll deal with the first one. Will they accept it and engage if it's council owned and council run? I think was that question specifically in regards to the strategy co-development phase and then the ownership of the implementation plan going forward, that whole...
Sorry, it's more to do that we want a successful outcome. But it'll only be a successful outcome if they have trust in the deliverer of the plan, whatever the plan is, and who is, does have to be, I wrote down, the honest broker. And if you listen to our constituents, and, we've all had conversations, and you're right, it might be one person that was on that evening, but there'll be 17 people in the family that's been affected by a consequence of that night, which will have all their emotions and perceptions and also the misinformation. So I'm just wondering whether or not, although we can do this piece of work, to deliver it and get the right results of a cohesed community, should it be the council that's leading that?
Yeah, that's an interesting role. So I'll answer. Yeah, I think, well, the short answer is I think the council's got a really important role in facilitating it, as well as other sections of the community. So, the business sector will have a really critical role to play in thinking about this going forward. The education sector will have a really important role going forward. Individuals within communities themselves, that's something that we're hearing around the country. People are keen to empower themselves and not rely on other people as well. So there's a whole range of kind of sectors that will need to start thinking about this. And what the unique role of the council is a kind of convening role for some of that, not necessarily to deliver all the initiatives within them, but to provide a coordination space as well. And then what we're seeing in many other locations is a strong role in delivering community initiatives that strengthen cohesion. And I think it links back to the first question that was raised around what's proven really critical for fostering community relations is activities around which people can convene, but with a focus on a shared interest, a shared activity. People aren't always that interested in meeting for the sake of bridging a divide, but they might meet to play pool if it's got some funding behind it. They might meet to do some boxing, to play football, to do a knitting class. And so there's a role for councils to do all kinds of initiatives around that, as well as more formalised service delivery that's got cohesion objectives kind of baked in behind the scenes as well. But you're absolutely right. I think it's a much bigger picture. The trust issue that you raised in the first sort of, as I was looking to clarify your question, I think it builds, and it's got to start somewhere. And in my experience of doing this work in various places, it's trust here isn't lower than places where I've seen really positive results in regards to cohesion or peace building, whatever it might be called in the UK and abroad. It's not the lowest baseline that I've seen really positive development start from. So I wouldn't have concerns about that. Again, it's about that proof of concept. Have you got a well thought through strategy which has brought in the right people so they feel included? Has this honest conversations phase manage to bring in the right people so they're ready to say their honest thoughts about what they want to see from the strategy. So, and I think it's yes to that second question, so I feel kind of confident the rest would follow. Yeah. Trigger point. It's really hard to say, and it's, you know, there's a common saying that it was obvious in retrospect. Like, everyone knew it was going to happen. Yeah, exactly. Everyone knew it was going to happen as soon as it happened. What I would say is that people had a sense that around Tamworth, one of the things we heard, people had a sense that things had deteriorated quite rapidly. A woman in one of the groups that we went to recently, who is of a BAME sort of background, said she sort of stopped going out a couple of weeks before the riots happened, and someone else who was in a community which wasn't necessarily targeted was saying, yeah, things had felt different for a couple of weeks before. So people were saying something felt different. And what that speaks to me of is the need for a tension monitoring system. So there were indicators there that communities were picking up on and speaking about. And if there were systems that periodically visited communities, there might have been a sense of ratcheting, of documenting a ratcheting tension. So I wouldn't say that it would have been clear exactly when it was going to happen. There would have been a sense of a direction of sentiment that would have been helpful of directing action. That's it, exactly, yeah.
Thank you. That was a useful discussion, I think. So,
It's all mindful of all of us that we don't want it to happen again. The goal is how we get to that goal is a massive, and Tamworth, and you're right, we are very protective of Tamworth. If I look at, and I'm Italian, mum and dad, even if you come from
thank you. Any other questions from councillors? I mean, for me, this is all about relationships and trust in communities and building those up, and that takes time. And once you've begun to establish it, you can't just leave it. You have to keep maintaining it, or trust can just disappear over a period of time. And I think the corrosive effect of social media doesn't help in the erosion of trust, because misinformation is around the world 10 times quicker than the truth, isn't it? So I think there's a huge job, but this is such an important piece of work, and councils will be aware that I've been saying this committee should be the one having oversight of community cohesion as its main plank of work. I've been saying that for some time, and I think this report re-emphasises that. So what we're being asked to do here now is to endorse the general direction of travel. We'll include some of the comments you've made and include that in the report to Cabinet on the 17th of April. I think that'll be helpful as a comment from us. Are there any final comments that people want to make? So we're being asked generally to endorse the direction of travel. Are we prepared to do that? Can somebody move that we're prepared to do that? Okay. I'll say Councillor Wells and I'll say Councillor Turner. All those in favour? Thank you very much. And thank you, Gabriel. You're welcome to stay if you wish to do so, but you're free to leave if you wish to do so. He's got to get his train. Right, thanks for that. Thank you for that. I thought that was a really good session. Thank you. Moving on then, Tamworth Community Grants and Funding Options 2025 onwards. Joe, over to you, I think.
Yeah, thank you. Chair. Yeah, and by way of an update really to scrutiny, that the report is not quite finalised yet. So these are, again, a little bit like the Belong, because there's a lot of work in the background around the Community Recovery Fund and the work that the Belong are doing, just to finalise grant arrangements and funding for next year. So I've tried to highlight through this presentation what we're just proposing, and obviously take questions and anything else that we think we need to look at, you know, from yourselves as the scrutiny committee to include in that report. So next slide, please. Thank you. At the moment, our current grant funding, as councillors are aware, is the £1,000 each that you have within your wards that can be spent across Tamworth if it's for the benefit of the people in your ward, and can be put together as necessary. Up until the 31st of March, there was a £15,590 community grant scheme, which will be discontinued in its present form at the end of March. The grants are administered by the Staffordshire Community Foundation, which provides us with some, you know, knowledge and coordination, and good sort of feedback from the outcomes of those grants. And we also have within the council the Community Infrastructure Levy Neighbourhood Fund, which the planning department looks through, that at the moment members can put forward projects, and that is currently being revised as well. So that's the areas at the moment that specifically the funding that my team look after, or work in conjunction with planning on those. Next slide, please. Thank you. So what we're looking for within the grant funding, we are producing a grant funding policy to outline those eligibility criteria, what people can apply for, to try and put it in one place, our approach, and make sure that communities moving forward are looking at it. Many councillors here will have been to and are aware that through the Community Recovery Fund, the We Are Tamworth crowdfunding platform is now live. So we'd like to endorse that as a primary source of community funding from April 2025 until March 2027 for community-led initiatives and projects. From the Community Recovery Fund, there is £90,000 worth of revenue funding, £75,000 worth of capital budget. It's hoped from there that the work of the work of Space Hive across the country actually allows community groups to put those projects forward and actually get support within their communities in a much wider capacity, whether that be through donations or actually to help. The next slide, please. We're also going to confirm that the councillor grant scheme budget of £30,000 continues to be administrated by the Community Foundation of Staffordshire for the individual councillor spend as it is currently. We'd like to endorse the ability of councillors to pledge part or all of their allowance to We Are Tamworth crowdfunding projects for community cohesion should they want to. However, that is not obligatory. You can either do that if there is a project that comes forward within your ward, or you can still retain that £1,000 to do smaller donations for certain projects. And we want to support the approved retention of £25,000 from the Community Recovery Fund, which will then be allocated to community projects which may support the outcomes and recommendations of the Honest Conversations project. So this is an additional £25,000 not gone to crowdfunding that we can use as a grant proposal for community groups that may wish to just identify projects as a result of what Gabriel has just been talking about, bringing those people together, whether it might be a knit and natter class somewhere or a football team somewhere. That level of grant funding will still be available for until 2027. Next slide, please. We'd like to ask Cabinet to approve the consideration of further councillor funding schemes or external grant funding to be added to the Space Hive We Are Tamworth platform, which may enhance community projects. Across the country, other councils have used, for instance, their UK Shared Prosperity funding and or their SIL neighbourhood funding to actually become a larger fund on a Space Hive crowdfunding platform for specific different criteria. So we want to just check whether that would be possible, and what as a borough then we can look to enhance the crowdfunding platform and get communities much more involved in actually developing and actually putting projects forward. And we're asking for the support of the promotion of external funding schemes to much more succinctly signpost Tamworth voluntary sector groups to sustainability, to assist that sustainability of the groups. So that may be involving the Staffordshire Community Foundation a lot more. They have a Wheel of Tamworth Fund, which is made up of a scheme that's drawn together a lot of Tamworth charities that may have closed down. And actually they still develop that fund to sort of outline the eligibility criteria. There is Support Staffordshire, actually signpost voluntary sector organisations and assist voluntary sector organisations in funding, and of course the asylum dispersal funding around support for the asylum seekers in Tamworth. Finally, we are going to introduce a grants and funding policy which outlines those proposals, and actually review that every year, because quite often external funding comes in. We might want to actually within the budgetary process put other grants and funding opportunities in the way, so that will be a policy to be reviewed every year. Finally, just quickly, the approval by Cabinet on the 17th of April and the timeline, implementation of a grants and funding policy. The We Are Tamworth crowdfunding, the first round closes at the end of April 2025, and it's hoped that that project will start over the summer, with the second funding round being in the autumn. Looking at work on potential other grant funding options by September. The Grants and Nominations Committee, the role will be sort of reviewed and looked at as part of the constitutional review as to that kind of mechanism for approving grants. The Community Recovery Fund grants, we're hoping to start those from September to March. Looking at the grants policy again, January, as the year comes up, an update to Cabinet April 2026. And that's those proposals, and really I'm looking at sort of endorsing that view. Any questions, any things that I can take? Have I missed, have we missed anything and you want me to look at from a grants and funding perspective? Thank you.
Thank you, Jo. I think it's quite a comprehensive report. Are there any observations or comments on it? This is the report that will go to Cabinet on the 17th of April. This is a chance to have an input. Councillor Turner.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yes, Jo, brilliant work as always. The only thing that springs to mind is that we tend to do and I was thinking of our previous conversation. This is on a yearly basis, and I was at the Hive where it was, short term, up to £5,000. And I was just thinking that if the community cohesion needs longer funding, how do we stop a cliff edge? It's okay promising the good people of Tamworth we're going to, invest time, money, grants, whatever, and we want you to come together. But if it stops abruptly and leaves it wide open then for that negative comment, what is the strategy?
That's obviously, as I said, we want to review that use of that crowdfunding platform. The idea from the Space Hive, I guess, we have that funding there until 2027, and I think as part of the work moving forward, we may need to identify, we can't be sure that the government will give any further funding through community cohesion, although they are producing a policy by the autumn. So yes, we will have to, one of the reasons we want to put in that annual review and actually highlight a little bit like Gabriel was saying, where are the tensions, where is the stretch points, what do we need to concentrate funding on? So I think we'd like to take that opportunity, although yearly seems quite onerous. I think in this perspective it isn't. Because, if we know we have grant funding coming in, what can we realistically do with other pots of funding? What can we put forward as policy changes and move things around? So we need to just look at our total approach to this. It's not about Tamworth necessarily giving the money, but I think if we can make more use of that government, what comes down in a much more cohesive, much more holistic way, Hence, within the community cohesion, in the recovery grant, we've managed to get some projects that cross the shared prosperity and the community cohesion. So you've got more money. And there is a project that's going to go through, that's going to be grant funded through community recovery around a young person's ambassadorial scheme, and I'm hoping to get some money from elsewhere to add that up. But that is one of the issues. I think, yeah, grant funding has always been that way, and then as voluntary sector organisations will always say, they always face that cliff edge because they spend time, that's most of their work, trying to keep those charities going, because they do run out of money. So it's one of those things that we need to review. It is a challenge, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Excellent question, by the way, because the building of relationships and trust is a long time journey.
No, that's pretty well.
Yeah.
No, I mean,
Takes time,
yeah.
and you've got to keep shouting from the rooftops that you're doing a good job. Bear with us, trust us, we will deliver.
Mm.
And if all of a sudden
It's about ensuring those expectations are well informed as we go along, and communication and honesty and clarity about what you're saying. Yeah, it's all of that. Excellent question, good discussion, thank you. Anything else? We've been asked, aren't we, Joe, to endorse the direction of travel again. Is everybody content to do so? Yeah, Councillor Turner? Yep, thank you.
Just looking at your approach to the community grant.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, who was it? It was
Councillor
Councillor Turner.
Turner, and I'm pretty sure Councillor Hadley was just about to signal at one point.
And then everyone's happy with it?
Yes, everybody's happy with that.
That policy, you want to look at it another time when it's in.
Yes.
And obviously, same with the final report from the community cohesion, more than happy to bring that forward.
Right, thank you, Joe. Again, more than welcome to stay, but if you need to get off, please do. Moving on to item 11, Health and Wellbeing Scrutiny Annual Report. This has been circulated, and I'm looking for I won't go through it. I see little purpose in it. You want me to read every single word of it out, do you? Including the appendices. So everybody had a look at the annual report. Are you content that that reflects the discussions we've had over the last year? Thank you very much. So I need somebody to move and second, please. Councillor Turner move. Councillor Hadley second. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. Moving on then, working group updates. I don't think there are any working group updates, are there, to my knowledge? Health and Wellbeing Scrutiny's work plan. If we want to add to the work plan, just a reminder that there are forms that are available to make that request to be included on the work plan. Any questions on that? That moves us on to, what am I moving on to? Yeah, this forward plan is the next item, but I think as you've rightly said, we've seen it all. So I'm trying to get my agenda back up again now, and it's not cooperating. So that moves me on to the close of the meeting. This is the last meeting of this scrutiny committee in this municipal year, and it is likely to be the last Health and Wellbeing Scrutiny Committee that I chair. So I did want to say from the chair to thank you for all your participation and considerable input over the last year, including those people who haven't been able to be with us tonight, those councillors not able to be with us tonight. And I want to thank our members of the public for showing an interest in the work of this committee. Thank you very much. And with that, I will declare the meeting closed at 7:16.